Thank you for joining us, everybody. Today we have the Wisdom Series back here again, and we're talking about racism and race in America and just having a discussion about that and what that looks like in our times here, and just trying to get some information and knowledge and some wisdom. So to my right, I have Professor Jordan Brown. He's the director of the Urban Outreach Center and Urban Renewal Center in Norfolk. And then to my left, I have Elizabethtley. She's a current student at WLC. And so we're just gonna have a conversation today. So yeah, like I said, we have Professor Jordan Brown with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, I am now the newly appointed director of the Urban Renewal Center, and our mission is simply to awaken society to its promised wholeness. And so what we do is, in a variety of avenues, we are reaching out to the community, we are sharing its history, that being specifically the history of Norfolk, and we are trying to come up with ways, partner with people, create coalitions to ensure that the history of Norfolk does not repeat itself, and that everybody in the city has a chance and opportunity to be exactly what God has probably called and purposed them to be.
I'm Elizabethtley. I'm a current student at WLC. I'm currently non-degree seeking, but I've loved these past Race in America seminars. I've always grown up in areas where it wasn't racially diverse, so that was never like a part of the conversation that I had. And so recently that has been something that's been brought up, and it's really important to me that since it wasn't a part of my past, I bring it up in my future and it's a part of my present. And I want to learn from you and learn from these seminars that we've been through.
So yeah, like I said, we want this to be a discussion. So we actually put together some questions from myself, from Lizzie, and just from various students that we're going to present to you today, and you just answer them the best as you can. So you want to go ahead?
Of course. So on Tuesday you were speaking in chapel, which by the way was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. But you mentioned that today we're in a series of pandemics. Obviously the biggest one that we know of currently is COVID-19. And you mentioned a few others, but the one that really caught my attention was that you said we're living in a racial pandemic. So if you don't mind, could you just define that for me or make that a little bit clearer?
Sure. Yeah, I think I said something about 4 or 5 different pandemics, and they all kind of tie in with each other in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But I will leave it at this. I believe that, especially concerning the racial pandemic, what we need to know is pandemics are usually tied to diseases. If I were going to call this a disease and say that it has some type of symptoms, I believe that the major symptom concerning the racial pandemic, and probably other ones, is selfishness. And so what's happening is, directly or indirectly, purpose or not on purpose or intentionally, unintentionally, people are looking inward into themselves, but they're not being self-aware, and that's a difference. They're not recognizing within themselves that something is making them uncomfortable, and instead of addressing that which is making them uncomfortable, they are going with what they know best, which normally probably wouldn't be an issue, but when other people's lives, other people's welfare, other people's vitality are at stake, that becomes an issue because the Bible teaches us that we sacrifice. And what's happening is that sacrifice, we're not recognizing that within ourselves, the need to do that. And so, yeah, it becomes problematic, and it manifests itself specifically right now within situations concerning people attacking groups like Black Lives Matter, which may not have the savoriest of Christian values connected to them. But nonetheless, if they're trying to do something right, even if you don't agree, recognize you don't agree, but at the same time, either do something to meet them where they're at or do something to exceed their efforts in making sure that things like a racial pandemic are not a problem. And the list goes on and on. But just in being brief, I think it's necessary for each and every one of us to realize that there is a racial pandemic, and whether you would like to admit it or not, it's not just impacting those that are being killed or just discriminated against, but it's also impacting those around them, and that ultimately everybody suffers because of it.
So you mentioned like this divide, and it actually got me thinking about what Pastor Courtney Macbeth said in the Race in America seminar earlier this week. And he had mentioned that not that we're like on the brink of civil war, but that there's a civil war spirit among the U.S. right now between people who don't even acknowledge the racial tensions and people who are like fully, about it. This is something they want to fight for every day of their life. So I guess, do you want to expand on that thought, and what's your opinion on that?
I don't B. Courtney McBeth did a great job on that. I don't feel like I need to expand or expound, but I will say this. A lot of things are tied to the spirit, in the spirit realm. And if you're a believer, then you have no choice but to believe in the supernatural and the mighty power of God. I'm also reminded of Ephesians chapter 6, where it tells us that we do not wrestle against the flesh, but we wrestle against things in the spirit realm. And the last time I checked, no friend, no relative, no neighbor, and at the same time, no president, no terrorist, no anybody. Last time I checked, none of them are spiritual principalities. And so I think as Christians, one of the first things we need to do is we need to take the time to really address exactly where we're focusing our energies, and then more importantly, why we are focusing them there. And if we did that, I'm willing to bet that most people would recognize within themselves that as understanding the bride of Christ is global, that we are probably treating individuals that are a part of that body just like we are, not as good as we're supposed to, and that we should probably do something about that, because that no doubt is ultimately contributing to the divide and the spiritual civil war that you're speaking of. And I think that it's going to play itself out. And to be honest with you, it's probably going to get a little bit uglier before it begins to get better. But the hope is that people will begin to search themselves and realize what we're doing right now isn't working. And we need to start looking at other possibilities, because the very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
So you talking about the patterns of going over this over and over again, of being oppressed and everything that you've been through, it kind of had me thinking, like, when everything first happened in the beginning of this year, the thought came to my head of, why isn't this a bigger issue? And it's not that this isn't a bigger issue, it's just that the light hasn't been shown on it. We are in a time where we're all sitting at home and we're watching the TV, and then we see George Floyd died, and we're like all up in arms about it. But the truth is that this has happened before. So do you think that ignoring this problem in the past has led to a greater uproar now, or has it only made the issue worse?
It's a really, really good question. I will be honest with you. Biblically, if anybody had Christian common sense, I don't mean to say it that way, but I do, I guess. You remember what the Bible says frequently about things that are in the dark. Specifically, I think Ephesians 5:8, one of my personal favorites, which says that which is in the dark shall be brought into the light. And not just that, but just kind of remembering exactly what Ephesians is all about, specifically the unity of the body of Christians, no matter who they are, Jew or Gentile, and how in this season we are seeking to unite in ways that we have never tried to unite before. And there are people like John Lewis, or just a variety of those generals who came before us in the civil rights movement have noted that this is not like anything that they've ever witnessed. So that being said, the fact that there has been suppression, and that is the word that I love to use, it just let me know probably a good 3, 4, 5 years ago, especially when things started trending with footage of people being abused, being tortured at the hands of police or other individuals being killed, that the suppression was about to be done, and that something was about to come to the light, and that when it did, we were going to have to face it. We were going to have to address it. And to be honest with you, I believe that the culmination was the 8 minutes and 46 seconds in which we witnessed a man be killed at the hands of officers for no other apparent reason than something in him thought he was superior than the one whose neck he was on. And so, I do believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is a season where we have no choice but to call a spade a spade. And by that, I mean this is a season where we have no other choice but to really, see that God hit the pause button, showed us some things we probably didn't want to see, and now is requiring of us to be able to act in the way that He would want us to act, to take care of those who are the lost and the least, of the marginalized, the broken, because if not, the one thing I know about history, you're talking about the history books, is those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And, for what it's worth, I do think that we're gaining momentum. That people who believe in the unified body of Christ and the unity of all people are making some moves that they've never made before. And I think that there's going to be some good fruit that comes from it. But for anybody who's still kind of on the fence about that or struggling through it, which is perfectly fine, it's perfectly natural. And plus, to that extent, the things that are being added to that, the fear mongering that is being added to that, or people questioning because of certain things that they would relate to Marxism or communism or CRT, justifiably so, but at the same time maybe a little overdone, then we can say that there will be fruit from that. But for those who are in that space right now, they need to begin doing the one thing that we're encouraging everybody to do right now, especially with this video, is to have a conversation, to be honest about where you are, where you stand, how you feel, but then also to do the one thing that the Bible says we should be doing, that people are not doing, and therefore seeing the adverse fruit, which is to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. People are quick to speak and quick to get angry. So, maybe we should pay attention to the words of the Bible a little bit more, and we'll see history not repeat itself. And I definitely advocate for that.
Yeah, so can you tell us about like your maybe personal experience or just anything that you're comfortable enough with telling us about, either with race or racism?
Sure, not a problem. I grew up in a place, College Park, Georgia, where before I was born, it was pretty much the hotbed of racial turmoil, especially along everything inside the Bible Belt. I can tell you that by the time I was born, there were still whites only and coloreds only signs in certain places in Georgia. And when I moved up here, it was a different feeling. But to be honest with you, I've always been one who's known that color didn't matter to me as far as like who I was going to be friends with or things of that nature, which almost got me in trouble, actually. And to be honest with you, I probably would have been in trouble anyway. My junior year in college, I was actually with our church on a retreat in the middle of, how I say this way, Dinwiddie County, Virginia. If that tells you anything, I'm sorry if the assumption is whatever. But some friends and I went to go get some snacks later in the evening. It had to been a little after 10 p.m. And it was a really dark town. There's no lights. And out of nowhere, these police lights start flashing right behind me. Like, didn't see them, didn't know where they came from. And the individual who pulled me over ended up calling them for backup for no important reason. He asked us why we were there. We told him we were there for a church retreat. And this one car, at least another car, shows up with two other officers. And like I said, it was me, another friend of mine who was Caucasian, and another friend of mine in the back of the car. And that didn't bode well for me either. This was the first time that I realized and I discovered that people aren't fans of black people and white people hanging out either. We ended up being at that stop for almost an hour. And I'm pretty sure that they were just trying to ask every question that they could, trying to figure out any way that they could to probably charge us for something that we did not do. Had it not been for the fact that this was the February after 9/11, and the person in the car behind me, or in my back seat, was in the Coast Guard. And so they're a part of the military. And I can tell you this because I watched the officer's response when they saw his identification, which was all kinds of, "Oh my God, we appreciate you. Thank you for serving our nation. Thank you for serving our country." All the while serving me this ticket for absolutely nothing. That was the first time that I realized that almost every day I have a decision to make. Do I just assume that all of them are like this? That all of them do not have my benefit or my welfare in mind? Or to know the fact that had he not been in the back of that car, or had something else played its hand differently, that we would have gone to jail that night, or worse. Had I decided that day that I was just going to be antitrust for any type of law enforcement, who knows where I would be today. But one of the things that I was reminded of, especially further down the road, is that we don't ask why, we genuinely ask what and how. And by that I mean this, because I know we're probably going over and I'm sorry about that. If we keep asking why people do what they do and why they are the way they are, we're never going to get the answers that we seek. We have to remember Philippians 4, 6, and 7 tells us to be anxious for nothing, but in prayer and petition and thanksgiving, present your request to God, and then his peace, which transcends all understanding, is going to cover our hearts and minds. And when I got that when I really got that understanding in my heart, it changed how I approached the process. Yeah, I'm going to say some things that are very unpopular and very uncomfortable to many, but I understand that the reason why I'm doing it is because sometimes that seed needs to be sown. I'm not disrespectful. I'm not going to, call anybody out on some craziness, but I need to share my heart. And I understand that sometimes, like Jesus sharing his heart with the Pharisees or with the disciples, people aren't going to always want to hear that. But eventually, somewhere down the road, they can and will get it. And they'll get the reason why I did it was because, I could have really done something different. I really could have internalized how that experience affected me differently. But thankfully, I decided not to. And because of that, I believe it's helped me to help other people, especially those who don't understand why I like saying terms like Black Lives Matter, or why I believe that showing the history of a city or even a nation is necessary to reshape it to ensure that that history does not repeat itself. So
that's really good. Thank you again for tuning into the Wisdom Series. We hope that you all gained something from this. I know I grew a little bit learning from both of these people. Elizabeth, thank you for your questions. They were really great. And Professor Brown, thank you for just being a well of wisdom to us. And check out the Urban Renewal Center. Also check out your podcast. What was that called again?
I, short for Inspired to Inspire.
Okay, yeah. It comes out on a weekly basis. It's really great. I listened to a few episodes. I've got a lot from it too. Thank you again, and y'all have a great week.